evening, Chicago. I'm Andy Zopp, along with my guest co-host, CAN TV's Executive Director, Darrious Hilmon. This week on the Newsroom, we're diving into the stories shaping power, accountability, and justice, both in City Hall and beyond.
The next hour features a special in-depth conversation with Chicago's Inspector General, Deborah Witzburg, Better Government Association's David Greising, and Union League Club of Chicago's Brian Boyle, discussing their individual and collective efforts to protect independent oversight.
On the roundtable, we'll unpack a wave of headlines. Senate President Don Harmon fined for improper campaign contributions. Former Alderwoman Carrie Austin ruled unfit for trial. And Alderman Walter Burnett Jr. makes his exit, but not without signaling support for his own son to take the reins. Plus, new details on the mistreatment of Abrego Garcia in a Salvadorian mega prison, a DHS visit to a Humboldt Park cultural center stirring fears of immigration raids, and a federal judge blocks Trump's birthright citizenship order just days after the Supreme Court ruling.
Closing out the hour, I'll sit with Academy Award nominated and Emmy Award winning filmmaker Tod Lending to talk about the power of storytelling, community, and his work chronicling the lives of America's most resilient youth and educators. Chicago Newsroom 2.0 starts right now.
We're honored to welcome a guest whose work stands at the intersection of accountability, ethics, and public trust in government. Deborah Witzburg, the Inspector General for the City of Chicago, joins us for a special conversation ahead of the launch of a new franchise segment here on Chicago Newsroom 2.0, a segment that aims to pull back the curtain on how government works, where it falters, and what it takes to protect the public interest. Beginning this September, Inside Oversight will be a recurring feature produced by CAN TV in partnership with the Office of the Inspector General. Each segment will shine a light on the systems that are designed to keep city government transparent, fair, and responsive to the people it serves, from internal investigations to ethical reforms and the checks and balances that often happen out of public view. Inspector General Witzburg has made it her mission to ensure that Chicagoans not only understand their rights, but also have confidence in the mechanisms designed to protect them. With the launch of Inside Oversight, she and her office are taking that commitment a step further, bringing oversight out of the shadows and into the civic spotlight. Deborah Witzburg joins us now to talk about what viewers can expect from the series, why public understanding of oversight matters, and how this kind of transparency can help build a stronger, more accountable Chicago. Inspector General Witzburg, welcome back to the Newsroom. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
As you know, I'm super excited about the launch of Inside Oversight. First of all, as we just talked, it's such a cool name. And, but it comes at a time when trust in government is both fragile but also so critically important to retain as we fight to keep our democracy alive. So why do you believe that this segment is so important, and why are you willing to work with us to help get it online?
Well, I'm so grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to do it. This is critically important to making the work that we do live in 3 dimensions outside in the world. Our work is only as impactful as we are effective in talking about it. I often reflect on the fact that we cannot do transparency work in secret, and we can't hold anybody accountable if nobody's watching. And so bringing our work out into public view is so critically important to ensure that, as I say, the work we are doing has an effect out in the world, has a real impact on people's experience of government, and what people can do when something goes wrong.
Right. And what do you think are some of the common misunderstandings about what you do? Like, people hear Inspector General as talking on the radio or on TV. What are they not getting about why what you do is so important?
Well, I think I think there are a number of mysteries and a number of misconceptions about what we do, and I think that historically, because the kind of oversight work we do is in some pieces subject to such strict confidentiality protections, I think that we as a profession have really struggled to navigate both our confidentiality obligations and our transparency mandates. That is a hard balance to strike, and I think that we, as I say, as a profession, have some progress to make there. I think that among the things that people, first of all, I think there are many people who don't know about us at all. They don't know who we are or what we do or where to find us. And so that's why you will now see, in the last couple of years, you will see billboards about us on the highway. You will see signs about us on the CTA in English and Spanish. And those are just sort of awareness raising efforts so people know who we are and what we do and where to find us. I think for people who have in some way encountered our work, some of the things that people might understand are or misunderstand might be to think that we only do misconduct investigations, that we are only out investigating the bad guys, and we do plenty of that. But we do other things as well. In addition to our administrative and criminal misconduct investigations, we also do program and policy work that's designed to find ways that the city can operate more effectively and efficiently and equitably. And we do transparency work. We spend tremendous effort trying to make information about the city more meaningfully publicly accessible. I am a firm believer that information about the government belongs to the governed, and it has long been true in this city, as in many other places, that there might be data, public information, which is theoretically publicly available, but that's very different from being meaningfully publicly accessible. And so I think, we do plenty of going after the bad guys, but I am always glad to have an opportunity to make clear, both to members of the public and to people in city government, that this is about calling balls and strikes, that not all the stories that we're here to tell are bad news stories, and that we do many different kinds of work, all in the service of our mission to promote economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in the operation of city government.
So what's your hope in terms of inside oversight? How do you think how will you hope that it will impact viewers?
I hope that people will take from the segment a better understanding, as we've talked about, of the different kinds of things that we do, and a better sense of the ways in which we can help when they have an experience with city government which goes wrong. Where they see something go wrong, they see somebody break the rules, where they have a suggestion. Nobody knows Chicago better than Chicagoans, and we only know what people tell us. And so I'm hoping that with a better view into what we do and how we work, that people will engage with us more often and more loudly.
Right. Recently, you had a piece that highlighted there's an issue you've been we've talked about before actually on the show with the city law department, and I think in the piece you described them as egregiously obstructive, which, by the way, I love that phrase.
You're welcome. We can share that.
But there's an ordinance, a proposed ordinance in the ethics committee to address those issues, and I think it recently got out of committee. So tell us a little bit about that and the importance of the ordinance. Absolutely.
This is, I think, an area where we have made very, very promising progress. We have, there is an ordinance which is in fact the product of a compromise of sorts, an agreement with Mayor Johnson's administration to remove what I think have been important obstacles to effective and independent oversight here in Chicago. And the two issues that the legislation takes on have to do with OIG's ability to protect the integrity and the confidentiality of our investigative interviews. We are trying to prevent a practice where the city's lawyers sit in on our investigative interviews. If we are interviewing a person in the context of an investigation, that person is entitled to have their lawyer in the room. The mayor is not entitled to have his lawyer sit in the room. So that's one issue. The second issue has to do with the scope of city records which we can access in order to do our work. And the ordinance includes measures to make sure that there are not city records that might be relevant to our investigations that are getting shielded from oversight, particularly where they might be embarrassing to City Hall.
Oh, wow, terrific. I mean, I think those things are important. I think people don't really appreciate, I think at a high level, I don't think they really understand, like if you're trying to talk to somebody and the mayor's lawyer sitting right there, it might, have a chilling effect on the person that you're trying to talk to and getting the information that you need. And while they can have some protection at an individual level, I think that's a really good point. And I think people just assume that, well, hey, you're the Inspector General, so you must have access to these records. But
one might assume that from reading the law. I agree.
Which would be why you need the ordinance. But
Yes.
I think we are gonna talk a little bit more about the ordinance and about your work and why it's so important with a group of people who care very much about transparency and accountability in city government. So we're gonna get to that shortly. And so on the other side of the break, Inspector General Witzburg and I will be joined at the roundtable by two other leaders equally committed to protecting the public trust by protecting independent oversight. It's an important and timely discussion you won't want to miss. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Candace Norcott. On the next episode of Be Well, we're taking on a topic that so many of us wrestle with, perfectionism. I'll be joined by licensed clinical psychologist and author of Flawed, Dr. Gregory Chassin. Join the conversation on CAN TV, Cable Channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
This week, we're placing the spotlight on an issue that cuts to the heart of trust in government, independent oversight. In a time when transparency is too often treated as optional and ethics rules as flexible, Chicago's oversight systems, designed to protect public interest, are under increasing pressure. From investigations into political interference to scrutiny over the gift room at City Hall, the role of watchdogs and ethical governance is being tested like never before. Joining us for this important conversation are three individuals on the front lines of accountability and reform. Joining Inspector General Witzburg and me for this critical conversation are David Greising, President and CEO of the Better Government Association, an investigative journalism and civic advocacy organization that has long championed ethical, effective government in Illinois. And representing the civic leadership side, we have Brian Boyle, who chairs the Administration of Justice Subcommittee at the Union League Club of Chicago, where institutional accountability remains a core priority. Together, we'll unpack where independent oversight is working, where it's falling short, and what more must be done to protect the public's right to a government that serves them and not itself. Leaders, welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. So glad you're here. First, let's start with giving a little bit of background. So, David, let's talk a little bit about the Better Government Association.
The Better Government Association, we've been around for just over 100 years. Started at the time when Al Capone was rising up the ranks of the mob in Chicago, and the mob ran City Hall. And we've been at it ever since, using investigative reporting in the interest of transparency, equity, and accountability in government, and also a small policy team that fights for ethics and openness in government.
Terrific. Thank you. And Brian, tell us a little bit about your work at the Union League Club.
Well, we are actually going back even further. The Union League Club was, here in Chicago, was formed very shortly after the Civil War to support the United States Constitution, which was, as most of us can remember from our history classes, very much under attack and after Reconstruction and so forth. Its earliest efforts involved the original Pendleton Act, the first federal civil service, and through the Chicago Crime Commission and identical work to what David's organization has been doing, to its support for the abolition of the death penalty over the last many years. The club has been involved in municipal issues as well as national issues, and a long history of public affairs work. Some of it is programming and public education and member education. But our ultimate mission is to do advocacy, where it is important to have a voice on behalf of good government, and in particular, in this case, transparency.
So, both of you work in transparency, and Inspector General Witzburg has talked with me a little bit before about why it matters. Tell me from your perspective why, and from civic leaders, why focusing on this topic, why ensuring that our accountability systems and independent oversight are important to the city of Chicago.
I think we see the effect of distrust all over the place right now, and it's had a significant electoral effect. Transparency is probably the antidote for conspiracies and other sorts of wild ideas taking root and growing. But to have proper transparency, we need to have trust in the process. And Deborah's worked very hard to deal with some of the deficiencies as they arise. There's, of course, a natural give and take between those who are under scrutiny or need to comply and those who want to provide the transparency. That back and forth may be a good thing. But ultimately, the issue has to land on the right side of transparency, as well as protecting genuine governmental interests. And this is a great example of accomplishing that.
So, David, you concur? Any other reasons from your perspective of why transparency matters so much and people should care?
Well, I think when we think about some of the big stories that have hit our city and that the Inspector General's office in particular has been involved in over the last number of years. The Inspector General helped uncover the police cover-up of the Laquan McDonald murder, helped us better understand the shortcomings of the ShotSpotter technology that was supposed to help reduce crime in our neighborhoods, revealed the fact that there's a gang database that was filled with inaccuracies and affecting people who were improperly being accused of being gang members. Other areas where things have happened that are disturbing in our city, the sexual abuse that was happening in the Chicago Park District. That's not a Chicago Inspector General work. That's really was done primarily through investigative journalism. The cover-up of the Hillco smokestack collapse, and the city hid records from that wasn't uncovered until the IG's office and investigative reporters came in. The last one you talked about earlier was the gift room, which seems to be kind of relative to those other things, perhaps of less consequence, but it also speaks to an underlying system of not following the rules, of taking advantage, perhaps for personal benefit, of the lack of transparency. So when there's not transparency, we can't hold government accountable. We need transparency in order to have a more effective government.
So, Inspector General Witzburg, what are you seeing? What are some of the structural threats to accountability and oversight and transparency that get in your way of you doing your job?
This is a question.
She's like, how much time do you have?
Indeed. Well, I think that there's a lot to be said about kind of the landscape in which we do our work. The city of Chicago has operated at a deficit of legitimacy with its residents for decades, for generations. The Chicago way is a proper noun, and not in a good way, for very good reason. And the city has spent generations earning every bit of its reputation. We as a city, we as a government have not given anyone the reason to give the city the benefit of any doubt. And so when things happen in dark corners at City Hall and in windowless rooms, we've given people every reason to assume the worst. I use that expression about windowless rooms metaphorically. Our work on the gift room suggested that might be a more literal problem than we had realized. But so that's sort of the starting point. We are not starting from neutral when we go about our work. And what that means for the work that we do and the challenges we have doing it is that there is deeply held resistance and cultural antagonism to oversight. This is a city where for all of these years, one of the reasons people have believed they could get away with abusing the public trust is that people have gotten away with abusing the public trust. And so there's tremendous, as I say, hostility to oversight and transparency to overcome. That is all but in the water at City Hall.
Wow. I'm going to come back to a couple of things you said, but it occurred to me when you were saying it that we might have viewers who haven't read the gift room story. So can you give us just a quick kind of summary of what it's just in case? So they're like, the gift room, what are they talking about? We're going to explain it.
Yes, so I will try to be brief here, although there's so much to say. We have, in the last couple of years, we have very intentionally taken a more aggressive and more proactive approach to enforcing the city's ethics rules and to investigating violations of the city's ethics rules. In our travels doing that work, one of the things that we came across were some issues around the reporting of gifts to city officials. So Chicago has a governmental ethics ordinance, however surprising that may seem given its outcomes. And that ordinance includes rules around the circumstances under which city officials can accept gifts, including what are called gifts accepted on behalf of the city. So not gifts accepted for personal use, theoretically, but gifts accepted on behalf of the city. I think of those as, intended to be things like public art or things that might be displayed in a library or
visiting officials often come bearing
exactly,
gifts,
sort of dignitary gifts,
particularly international.
Absolutely,
right? When they come, they meet. It's like when you go to your neighbor's house, you got to bring a basket.
Or else, what would my mother say?
Right,
yes, exactly. No, so I think that's very much like the category of things that are designed to be covered here. But we found that pursuant to an unwritten agreement going back many mayoral administrations, the mayor's office was not following the generally applicable rules around public reporting of those gifts. So I will say it's been my experience in this work that coming across an unwritten agreement in the context of an ethics investigation is rarely a piece of good news. So these generally applicable rules say that when city officials accept a gift on behalf of the city, they have to report it publicly, which sort of makes sense from a common sense perspective. These gifts, if they are accepted on behalf of the city, belong to the city of Chicago and its residents. But the mayor's office was not complying with this public reporting, and this unwritten agreement said that instead of doing the public reporting, they could keep a log book, a physical book on the 5th floor of City Hall to make a record of gifts. And so, having learned that, we were interested in what information might be available to a member of the public. And this is, we've talked a lot about our efforts to kind of help people access information to which they are entitled as taxpayers. And so, in an undercover capacity, I sent some investigators to the 5th floor of City Hall to ask to see the logbook, to sort of see what a member of the public might be able to learn about it. They were told they couldn't see a logbook, they could submit a Freedom of Information Act request. So we did that again in an undercover capacity. The mayor's office did not respond to the FOIA request. Then and only then did we send an official OIG compelled document request for a gift log. We got it. It showed gifts including whiskey and cufflinks and designer handbags and size 14 men's shoes, which had been accepted on behalf of the city, and at least some of those gifts were listed as being stored in what was called a gift room on the document we got. So we went back to City Hall, this time very much in an overt capacity, badges first, and asked to see the gift room. The city's law department, acting on behalf of the mayor's office, denied our access to the gift room. And so we issued a public report highlighting, I think, really both of those issues, both the kind of failure to comply with the generally applicable reporting rules and the obstruction of OIG's access to a city facility.
Right. And that point, Brian, gets to the second issue that I wanted to raise, because Inspector General Witzburg talked about kind of this kind of embedded antithesis towards accountability or transparency. But why? Like that whole story just seems so stupid. Like, why wouldn't you not just go, here it is, here's the logbook, here's the room, it's not our stuff, we don't care. And every mayor, that I am aware of has come in and said, we're going to be transparent, we're going to be accountable. So what happens? What's the disconnect here?
Well, I think probably Deborah's better. I don't know that you ever get to ask the question, why not? But it is a great question.
You're like, what? You're kidding, right?
Well, it is a great question. My perception would be it's everything from, we meant to get around to that, to, oh yeah, I should be accounting for that too, to, there are probably hundreds of things like this that are out there. Basic shame, not managing things, looking like you're maybe not as functional as you should be, to potentially doing things that are, much more, much closer to theft or whatever.
Yeah.
So it could be a bunch of things. I don't know, what do you have a sense of the why?
I think you have an interesting historical perspective. I'd be interested in what you think about this. I think that when we talk about resistance to oversight, hostility to reform, there's nothing theoretical about that. I do think there is a kind of deeply held view that where everyone who has come before has been able to do something one way, that there's no reason to have to do it differently. And on a human level, I will say, I sort of get that. I sort of get that if we are actually to undertake transformational change, we can't keep doing the same things and expecting different outcomes. We actually have to change the way we treat these issues. And that means that somebody is the first person to get jammed up for doing something the way it's always been done. And that feels really unfair to the people involved. And as I say, on a human level, I sort of understand that. That said, I am firmly of the view that the people in power in this city are not entitled to the status quo. And so I think all of that sort of surrounds this resistance, this deeply held resistance to reform. That's why they've always said, right, Chicago isn't ready for reform.
Right, and the trouble is that unwinding the status quo and changing expectations and behaviors is the challenging part. And what you've done in bringing to the fore some of these questions about the way the city responds to legitimate questions and legitimate investigative exercise has been eye-opening. I've covered government in Chicago for 40-some years, and I didn't know that corporation counsel lawyers could sit in on investigative interviews. And not only did I know that, but evidently inspectors general over the years have somehow gone along with that and allowed it to happen. And we had a situation where when that came to light, and you wrote this very powerful letter about the shortcomings of cooperation on the part of the city. The City Corporation Counsel, Mary Richardson Lowry, who is very well respected and does by and large is perceived to do a very good job. Really? She asserted that, well, actually, no, the requests you've made for more openness violate the law, violate Illinois Supreme Court precedent, et cetera, et cetera. It took the BGA to come and do a study to see if in fact the request that the Inspector General was making complied with the law or not. And our lawyer's finding was, by all means, she's asking for things that are perfectly legal. The question became, are they politically tolerable? And what we've seen in City Council that in this week's activity is some concessions were made, but we've made some advancement. For example, corporation counsel lawyers can't just sit in on any interview they feel like. They have to be invited in now. That's an improvement. It's not quite as far as maybe it ought to go. The IG's office does not have full subpoena power, still doesn't. There was too much pushback on that to overcome. But the IG can get a lot of information from the city. The city now has to cooperate with subpoenas more so than they previously were required to. So it just helps to look at these issues that Deborah Witzburg had to push for. One would have expected they were just kind of common sense, and they have not been, and they were now hard-fought, incremental, and not quite fully satisfying progress, but progress nonetheless.
Right, and I do think your point, about the Corp Counsel's office is a good one. The Corporation Counsel is very well respected and well done, and so she made an argument, right? It turned out not correct, and
not
ultimately,
fully supported by
but
the facts.
we've reached a resolution. But I think this important conversation that we're going to have to end because we are out of time, which always happens with my really important conversation. But the real important point here is that we need the Inspector General, but we also need voices like what you're doing at the Union League Club, what the Better Government Association is doing to continue to push this effort, because in people's general tendency is to go like, oh, maybe I made a mistake. I don't want people to know. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you for what you're doing. Continue to do it because the people of Chicago need to know. And Inspector General Witzburg, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being back here.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
We are looking forward to the first edition of Inside Oversight this September. On the other side of the break, Darrious is joined by roundtable regulars Hugo Balta and Sufyan Sohel as we unpack the latest news coming out of City Hall, the White House, and the courts. Stay with us.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV on demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
This week on the Roundtable, we'll take a closer look at a series of headlines that, taken together, paint a complex portrait of political power, accountability, and human rights in flux, both here in Chicago and on the national stage. We begin in Springfield, where Senate President Don Harmon is currently appealing a fine he received for accepting improper campaign contributions, raising renewed questions about ethics enforcement and the influence of special interests in Illinois politics. Back here in the city, a federal judge has ruled former Alderwoman Carrie Austin is unfit to stand trial on corruption charges, prompting reflection on the intersection of justice, age, and legacy. Meanwhile, Alderman Walter Burnett Jr. has announced his departure from City Council, but not without controversy, as he signals support for his own son to succeed him, sparking concerns about political dynasties in public office. And turning our attention to international human rights, we revisit the case of Abrego Garcia, the Salvadoran man with U.S. ties imprisoned without trial in one of El Salvador's most notorious megaprisons. His lawyers are now detailing horrific accounts of torture and mistreatment under the guise of security cooperation. Back here in Chicago, a recent Department of Homeland Security visit to the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture in Humboldt Park has triggered alarm and speculation, particularly among undocumented communities, about a possible return to immigration and enforcement raids in so-called sanctuary spaces. And finally, on the national legal front, a federal judge has blocked President Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship following last week's Supreme Court ruling that reaffirms constitutional protections for children born on U.S. soil. Each of these stories demand close attention because whether the issue is political, ethics, public succession, immigrant justice, or the very definition of citizenship, the consequences will shape the lives and liberties of real people for years to come. Helping to unpack it all, I'm joined by Roundtable regulars, one who took the entire summer off, but he's back, Hugo Balta, publisher of Latino News Network, and the new executive director of the Fulcrum U.S., and Cook County Commission on Human Rights Chair, Sufyan Sohel, who has been in the trenches with us as a lot of news has come out. I go back to just as those executive orders were first coming out, you were sitting with us. So welcome back, welcome back.
Thank you.
A lot to dive into, so let's just go for it. Senate President Don Harmon, $9.8 million fine for accepting campaign cash. How significant is this?
I think it's, like you said in the beginning, it's a complex portrait. But this is not the first time we've seen this, and it's not going to be the last time. Politicians, elected officials will look for loopholes to essentially break the law. And until change happens, they're going to continue to do it over and over again, and we're going to continue to have this conversation. Does the fine fit the crime? I'm not 100% sure, but we need to focus on the problem, the systemic problem, and not necessarily this particular case.
Any thoughts, Sufyan, on
Agree
this?
wholeheartedly, and I could actually care less what the amount of the fine was, but it signifies that transparency is so important, and we can't have a Senate president who's like writing his own rules on issues of campaign finance, and that we really, really need to be examining these loopholes and these policies that are making it really unfair.
Yeah. What is it going to take? Because apparently the aftermath of a pandemic and the aftermath of a presidential election that we're experiencing, not every day, but every hour, that hasn't been enough to get us all to go, maybe we should all rethink. What will it take, Sufyan?
I mean, I think we see this locally, statewide, and nationally, where people are trying to skirt these rules that are in place as much as they can. And to your point, they're not necessarily bad guys. They're all saying they're doing it for the right reasons, but it'll take the people. Too often we say, oh, that's a Chicago politics for you. But the people have to say, we will no longer tolerate this. We expect better from those that we choose to elect us, and you need to set the example for the rest of us to follow, especially someone who's a Senate president.
Got it.
And I think it's also the people's fault.
Yeah.
Say it.
They're turning the other cheek. They're turning a blind eye. It's okay when their candidate does it. It's not okay when the other person does it. You're still permitting the breaking of rules and the breaking of laws. And yes, it is always in the voters' hands to affect change, but they are as motivated not to change as are the politicians that break these rules.
Agreed.
Wow. And it takes me to a continuing theme that we've had this week, and it feels like last week as well. Alderwoman Carrie Austin was recently ruled unfit to stand trial on federal bribery charges. What happens to those? I'm going to look at you, the legal mind first. What happens to those unresolved corruption allegations, and what precedent does this set for bad actors who may look for ways not to face the piper?
Great question. First off, I read that she had heart issues and cancer, and I do pray that she recovers as quickly as possible, right? And I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't.
Sure.
But what it signifies is that those in power have ways out sometimes to escape. The trial's delayed indefinitely. And my bigger question is, she's someone in power, a former alderwoman who's dealing with these issues. What happens? Are the same extensions going to be granted to those who may not have the same access or the same means if they're dealing with similar issues? Will their trial also, will they be given the same consideration to postpone their trial if they ask for that extension as well?
Or in this case, it's not even postponing, it is making it go ghost.
It's an indefinite extension, yeah.
And I think the answer is obvious. No.
Agreed.
It never is. And it never will be. Those with power and influence will always get a break versus regular people. One. Secondly, yes, absolutely. Very hard not to be sympathetic to someone who's struggling with their health. But the law's supposed to be blind, isn't it? So you have to enforce the laws. If not, then why do we have them? And also, all things considered, she's still getting a pension, $9,500 pension a month.
Is that a fact?
That's what I read in Crane's and on the Chicago Tribune. So, absolutely, how could it be that you can commit a crime and still be getting paid? Tax dollars, by the way.
What's the way forward? What's the breaking point? I'm still waiting for that answer. What is the breaking point?
As you're looking at me, I will go back to the people. The people need to stand up and say, hey, we want more accountability. We expect more. But I heard you earlier where you said that people normalize some of this, and some of them want this, and they're okay with this. And unless we expect higher from ourselves and those elected to represent us, I look at her case, and she's charged with bribery and innocent till proven guilty. I get the eyes of justice, but she's still accountable to her voters and the people of Chicago, and they deserve justice too. So how is she going to get her justice? How are they going to get their justice? Right? If I am charged with murder and I'm too ill to stand trial, the family of those who I alleged hurt
and does that
need justice.
Indirectly play a role into why we hear so many voters say, it doesn't matter what I do. That's why I'm not voting. It doesn't matter. Because if you don't feel like people are going to be held to account, that there's always a way out. So yes, voters should be held accountable. We should be held accountable as citizens. But when this is all you're saying, what is the motivation for me to go and vote when ultimately this is happening? I'm watching it happen consistently. How do we push it? And maybe the question, and maybe it's not the question we can answer today, but maybe to your point, it is what conversation should we be having with each other as voters, as citizens who have a right to independent oversight, who have a right to hold their leaders accountable. What conversation should we be having? Maybe to your point, it really is on us, the voter, because nationally, locally, we've voted for this. Okay.
And look, it's not just about having conversation. It's about taking action. Absolutely, a program like Newsroom, Can TV in general, it is a valuable platform for marginalized communities, all communities, to be seen and to be heard. But the next step is, how do we take those conversations, that energy, and turn it into action? And I do believe that CAN TV has that opportunity. Often I hear you at the end of programs speak to the audience directly, and you're giving your perspective, your voice, in pointing to, from your view, what is wrong and what right looks like. I think the next step is, now let's go do some right.
Got it.
Let's go do some right when it's time to head to the polls. And other organizations that work in the civic engagement space need to go from just informing and educating to empowering to act. If not, we're having great conversations, and we'll continue to have them, but we're spinning our wheels.
We're spinning our wheels. Got it. In our limited time, I'm going to combine 3 issues that impact the immigrant community, but all of us, but certainly that causes, I cannot imagine right now if I was an undocumented citizen here, what that feels like. And I was just watching something on CNN where a naturalized citizen, who is also a pundit, went, oh no, it's me now. I'm on the firing line, and I did all of this, and to do it the right way was incredibly expensive, and it took years to do. And you've got people who are in the immigration courts right now trying to do the right thing, and one of those examples, Abrego Garcia, we talked about it months ago with Hilary Flores from Borderless magazine, and we went through the timeline. And recently his lawyers came out with some shocking, but unfortunately not surprising information about
Conditions.
what was happening, the conditions. And then on top of that, the DHS visit to the Puerto Rican Museum. Supreme Court is going one way, taking rights away from federal judges to try to put safeguards in place nationally against what's happening. So Abrego Garcia, what is his likely outcome here? It feels like, again, they're not going to stop until they find a way to make this, they're going to find wrong somehow. What does this look like? Where are we at with this right now?
They're going to try, but what I'm seeing now is people are, you mentioned these 3 different things, and people are slowly starting to open their eyes of how it's all connected. And we've talked about this several times here, is that all these issues are not isolated. It's part of this collective, like we're coming after you, and we're going to isolate one group after another group after another group, so that you guys can just focus on yourselves and we can keep our power. But what our people are slowly opening their eyes, like, hey, sending this guy to El Salvador and others to El Salvador, some who are missing still, is wrong. Having this jail in Florida where people are being sent for arbitrary reasons is wrong. And I'm seeing people's eyes slowly open, even those that may never be potentially impacted, but not quick enough. And that's what's going to have to take, is we need to show people that this is wrong. Like, if anyone in America can be sent to another country in extremely inhumane conditions and risk their lives there, what is America about anymore? Who are we as a country? And people are starting to question that.
We never have enough time. I'm going to have to end this there. You will be back with us for our live show next week. You will be back in September, and we will be announcing some great things that we're working on specific to this immigration question and specific to turning increased understanding into measurable action. But in the meantime, let me thank you both. You know this, bottom of my heart. Hugo, Balta, Sufyan, Sohel, my brothers, my friends, thank you for being here as always. On the other side of the break, I'll be joined by Academy Award nominated and Emmy-winning filmmaker Tod Lending, discussing his documentary, The Principal Story. Stay with us.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
Behind every great school is a great leader. And in public education, few roles are more challenging or more impactful than that of a principal. In the acclaimed documentary, The Principal Story, filmmaker Tod Lending offers a rare and deeply human look inside the lives of two elementary school principals working in underserved communities, capturing the high-stakes daily battles and quiet triumphs of leading a school from the inside out. The film is a powerful reminder that education reform isn't just about policy, it's about the people. Next Tuesday, July 22nd, The Principal Story will make its Cannes TV premiere, and we couldn't be more excited to share this incredible documentary with our viewers. Joining us now is Tod Lending himself, the director behind this moving and thought-provoking film, to talk about what drew him into this story and what he learned in the process, and why strong school leadership matters now more than ever. Tod Lending, Academy Award nominated, Emmy-winning filmmaker. It is a pleasure to have you here. I screened the film as we were preparing it for our air. My gosh. Beautifully shot, beautifully produced, but the human element of this and the care with which your lens caught these, and I fell in love with, I'm going to cry a little bit, oh my God. I fell in love with these and I rooted for them and I was like, oh. And what they are, and their love for those young people. Mm-hmm. So what inspired you to turn your lens on school principals? Because it really is a group, we talk about teachers, you know, but that's a group that doesn't always get the attention when we're talking about public education. What inspired you to focus on the principal story?
So I have to give the credit to the Walls Foundation. They put out an RFP, a request for proposal, that they sent out to 16 filmmakers from across the country. How I got on that list, I don't know, but I somehow got on the list and competed. We all competed for a $1.5 million grant that was going to focus on this issue of principal leadership. The Walls Foundation had been focused on this very issue for at least a couple of decades. I think it was about 25 years. They were focusing specifically on the importance of principal leadership, doing in-depth longitudinal studies, sinking millions of dollars into it. And the film was to be the capstone of their study. And so this was a subject that, quite honestly, I hadn't considered until the request for proposal came. And it came, and it looked really interesting to me. And education has always been a very important part of my other films that I've made. There's no question that education, I think, you know, is at the root of us improving our communities.
Absolutely.
And God, hopefully someday uplifting this specifically the South and West Side. So that is how it came about. And then we went out and we pre-interviewed.
A year.
We spent a year
with two principals, and I want you to give a bit of color and context. I don't want to give too much away as the viewer, but it's two principals. One is sort of a veteran. And then one, if I'm recalling correctly, this is her first principal.
Second year. Teresa Dunbar, second year.
In a school where they went, oh, this is your second year here, but this school has been underperforming. So you've got a ticking time clock or a ticking bomb. If this doesn't get turned around. So good luck in the new role, but you've got to turn this around.
Yes.
Talk about the color and contrast, and both are incredible leaders. With similar and different challenges, but help frame for our viewers the selection of the school in Springfield and the school in Chicago. What's the contrast and compare there?
So, first of all, to start with, what they have in common is they both have, in the case of Teresa Dunbar, who's the principal of Nash, who's the one that you were speaking about, that is kind of considered a novice principal at 2 years.
And that's in Chicago.
Yeah, that's the one in Chicago. It's on Erie. It's like 4800 West on Erie. Very tough population. 95% low income were her students. Now with Carrie, who was in Springfield, who had more of a mix of white and black. Teresa was 99.9% black. Carrie Purcell, who was down in Springfield, who was a very experienced principal, but had brought her school up over a 7-year period from being in the absolute, as she said, the gutter, brought it up to being a high-performing school. She had 85% kids that were, and black and white, that were low income. So that's the thing they had in common, but we wanted to make sure we weren't doing a story about two principals who were both inner city. We wanted to get another school that was more rural. We wanted to get one principal that's a novice, one that's more experienced, but both that are starting with schools that are really in trouble. And Teresa's school, Nash Elementary, was on probation for 12 years. They were on probation. If they didn't raise their test scores.
That's a decade of children impacted by the dysfunction of the system.
Yep. Okay. And then that just increases the poverty in the community and on and on and on. So she had to turn this school around. So it was very dramatic.
And you don't spend a day. This is over the course of a year. You get invested, and I won't give anything away. So let me. There are so many things about this. I cannot wait for this to air, and I'm going to watch it again as it airs next week on our air. But one of the many strengths of this film, and we talk about it here in this inflection point, we have got to get to the human. We've got to humanize. Technology has made us other. And the way that this film humanizes what is an incredibly complex subject of school leadership. What surprised you the most about the world that these principals, both ladies, were navigating on a daily basis? What was most surprising?
I was completely blown away by the complexity of the job. We've all been through school, right? And how much attention do we ever pay to the principal? So to come in and to focus specifically like a laser on that job, and to come to understand that job, you have to have so many skills. You have to know how to manage people. You have to know how to manage a budget. You have to know how to manage a building. You have to know how to incorporate professional development for your teachers. You have to have a heart and soul for children, for kids. You have to be a jack of all trades. You are working 12 to 14 hours a day. And at that time, the average principal lasted 5 years in a school. In the case of Teresa, her school, she was a sixth principal over 5 years. Those principals were barely lasting a year.
The churn rate.
So it's a really tough job. And you have to build a culture and climate within the school that kids are going to grow in, and you have to engage the parents. If you don't have the parents, you're done.
What do you want viewers, and viewers are policymakers, educators, folks like me, what do you want them to take away from a viewing of this documentary?
I want them to hopefully understand how important, how imperative it is to support principals and to support that type of leadership so that they can raise our children in the way that we want them raised and educate them in the way that we want to educate them. I hope that viewers, I hope that policymakers specifically would then, be focused on, rather than eliminating the Department of Education, which somebody is doing in this country, that in fact they would expand the Department of Education and that they would see how important, without a strong principal that is being paid properly, supported properly, the schools aren't going to make it. They're going to fail. You got to have it, along with good teachers.
I'm going to go global, and we've got about 30 seconds for your answer. You talked about some consistent themes in sort of the documentaries you create. What weight do you hold as your responsibility for telling stories like this? Why does it matter so much, whether it's education, but these human-centered stories? Why does it matter?
Well, first of all, it is a huge responsibility when you do these types of films, where in this case, this is actually one of my shorter films where I followed these principals for a year. I've done other films where I followed people and families, guys getting out of prison for 5 years, for 6 years. And you have an enormous responsibility to your subjects, who you're asking to trust you. To trust you. Let them into your life and film them and put them in front of an audience of thousands, millions that see this, and even around the world. These films go around the world. So it's a huge responsibility.
I think that's from what I saw, and I'm telling you right now, Tod, I'm so glad our paths are crossed. I'm so glad that in this moment we just spent the past hour talking, or this hour talking about what we've been talking about. We always want to just leave with some hope. It's not easy. It's complex, but I think it's that human connection that's ultimately going to save us. If there's any saving to be done. So gratitude to storytellers like you. The power of storytelling is just more important than ever. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Listen, this important story airs next week. Please make the time. It's 1 hour. It is one of the best hours you'll spend next week, I promise you. On the other side of the break, I'm back with some final thoughts. Stay with us.
Being a principal is a wonderful way to affect change in the world. Children are going to go out into the world and do great things, my children, and I get to be a part of that.
I love my kids, and better than that, my kids love me. Nobody in the city has that on me, nobody.
Thanks for sticking with us, Chicago. As we bring this week's episode to a close, my co-host and CAN TV's executive director, Darrious Hilmon, has some final thoughts well worth hearing. Darrious, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wendy. Chicago is a city that prides itself on its grit, its diversity, and its deep civic spirit. But there's one tradition we ought to leave behind: the quiet backroom coronation of children stepping into their parents' seats in public office, as if public service were a family heirloom. Let's call it what it is. It's political nepotism dressed up as continuity. Take the case of former Alderwoman Carrie Austin. After decades in office, Austin vacated her seat amid a federal bribery indictment. But how did she get there in the first place? She was appointed in 1994 to replace her late husband, Lemuel Austin, in the 34th Ward, a family legacy, until that legacy ended in federal court and a ruling that she's now unfit to stand trial. Or consider Alderman Walter Burnett Jr., a longtime and respected figure on the city council, who recently announced he'll be stepping down, only to immediately suggest his son might make a great replacement. Not through an election, not through a democratic process, but through an implied handoff, as if city council were a franchise to be inherited. Let's be clear, the issue isn't whether a son or daughter is qualified. It's the undemocratic assumption that family lineage should be a factor at all. We don't let teachers pass their classrooms down to their kids. We don't let police officers or judges hand over the badge or the bench. Why should elected office be any different? Worse still, this kind of dynastic governance sends the wrong message to the very communities these officials are supposed to serve. That opportunity and leadership are reserved for the well-connected. That loyalty trumps merit. That political families get to bend the arc of democracy to fit their own storylines. Chicago has no shortage of passionate, qualified, community-rooted individuals ready to lead. But when the back door is left open for family members, the front door of public service gets harder to walk through for everyone else. This isn't a family business. It's a public trust, and we ought to start treating it that way. Let the voters decide, each and every time.
Thank you, Darrious. And thank you, Chicago, for making CAN TV a part of your day. That's our time for this week. Next week, Darrious is back, joining me to co-host a special live edition of the Newsroom.
In addition to unpacking the latest news impacting the lives of Chicagoans with roundtable regulars Sufyan Sohel, Wati Scaddings, and Swathi Staley, we'll talk education and youth success with CAN TV's chief education correspondent, Adrian Segura, Chi-CAT Executive Director Tina Horn, and UNCF's new Vice President of Development, Tawana Streeter. It's an hour of community-centered television you don't want to miss.
Until then, be well and well informed.